Hey Kinfolk. So today we are talking about the Gorg Tech Black Market Sword. So I like this. This lasts about 2 years. There's a lot of great things about this weapon, but there's a lot of things that I think are lacking in this weapon. So the tip finally blew out on me on a Pell here, and after about 2 years of using it, and yeah, so we're going to do a reblade. We're going to do some other stuff to help improve this weapon, and I'm going to give you my review after all the builds, and I can show you guys how I do my reblades. Of course, I've got the reblade kit from Gorg Tech, so we're going to slap this on there, and we're going to make a few improvements. I'm going to talk a little bit more about my review of this particular sword. So stay tuned. So one of the greatest things about this weapon is that it was put together really well. It was difficult to get the foam off of the core, and but there were some flaws. That one's right there. It's too sharp at the end, and it'll cut through all of your foam. I think it could have lasted a bit longer if they did it differently. And I think how they did their handles was actually quite well done. However, it's just still too small for my taste. I also really like the pommel. The pommel just stayed on, and after 2 years it still looks pretty good. And so yeah, I'd like to take my hat off to some of the great things they've done with their tech. So this is a 501 scraper, and it has all sorts of edges and blades to help clear off the foam. But I'm impatient and lazy, so I have a different method here. So I have a plastic wire wheel that will help just kind of gently sand off the foam off of the shaft there, off of the core, and it does a really good job, and it's so useful for so many different applications. And this is a 1.25 inch poplar dowel, and this is what I'm going to make a handle out of. You could do this with regular hand tools, but again, I'd much rather use power tools. And since 1.25 inches, I'm going to rip 1/8 inch off of each side, and I'm going to try and create an oval out of it. Now, since it's round, this thing will kind of roll on you, and that's dangerous, and that saw will cut off your fingers quick, and you won't even feel it. And so I'm trying to keep my fingers and everything away from the saw. I'm going to readjust, go down to 1 inch, and then put the side that you just cut up against the fence, and you can get a nice oval shape from that. So once you got that cut, you want to drill your holes, and this is a nice little jig where you can find the center at the end of a dowel or pipe or whatever, and that way you're drilling in the center of it and not off to the side and at an angle and whatnot. And so the issue with this is that even though the handle's short, the drill bit just isn't long enough to get all the way through. So you have to flip it over and do the other side. So again, you got to make sure that it's centered on both sides. Otherwise, the holes aren't going to meet just right. And of course, you want to smooth off any burrs and whatnot with a round raspy file. And you want to finish up the oval shape with a hand sander. This is a block sander. And glue it in place with some Gorilla Glue. And Gorilla Glue is great for these kinds of applications. When you have two different types of mediums, you want to use kind of an epoxy or a Gorilla Glue. And this is 4-pound MC foam, or yeah, 4-pound MC foam, and I got it at, I think, USA Foam. And it cost me like $50 for a whole sheet, and it's lasted me for years. And it's great for making pommels and crossguards and all sorts of like courtesy padding areas. So yeah, this stuff is pretty good, and it sands up quite well, plastic ups well. And I'm using hot glue to put it together. Now, I love hot glue for stuff like this. Now, I wouldn't use hot glue for a striking surface, but for stuff like this, it's ideal. The reason why is it's fast. It melts the foam on there, and there's no chemicals for you to worry about, and it's just a nice, simple, easy little gluing method. Also, a belt sander. When you're trying to shape it and whatnot, belt sander's the best. It gives you a nice smooth sand, whereas a random orbital sander will tend to leave little fuzzies and burrs that aren't really great. They're really difficult to get rid of. And again, I'm going to Gorilla Glue this bad boy in place. And when you put it in place, make sure that it lines up with your handle. Otherwise, it's going to be all kind of screwy and weird. And that's nice and tight. Nice good grip. Nice trigger grip. So one way I'm going to fix the thrusting tip is I'm going to round off those edges to make sure they can't cut through the foam. Just like that. Then this is strapping tape. Strapping tape is a lot like packing tape, but it has threads going both directions, and you have to cut it with scissors. You can't tear it, just like packing tape. And it's really, really tough stuff. It's like 12 bucks a roll though. And really the only thing that falls apart about it is just kind of gets brittle and it breaks. And so when you get this little nub on here, so again it's 4-pound foam, and you want to torque wrap it on there, and this will help kind of round over that edge to keep the foam from cutting, or yeah, keep the striking foam from cutting through. And again, you don't want to have too much on there, because it will keep it will provide more leverage for that foam to shear off, and you want the least amount of leverage on there. And of course you want to sand it up and scuff it up so the glue will attach itself. What I'm using there is a little acid brush. You can get a whole packet of those from whatever online store that you want to use. And you got to make sure that you put at least 2 coats, and you want to coat both things that you want to glue together. The core and the box core right there, the little foam. And you want to make sure that you close up any gaps. And once it's touching the glue, once the 2 pieces are together, that's it, that they're together. You can kind of try and pull them apart, but you're going to tear up the foam and you're going to tear up the glue. And eventually when you get done gluing the foam right there on there, you want to put it in a clamp. And again, 2 layers on both pieces. You gotta want to wait for the glue to get tacky to where it's kind of has a matte finish. And tacky means that you can touch it and none of the glue comes up on your fingers, and it's kind of sticky. Pro tip, using a box fan like this helps remove any fumes from the area. By the way, those are just regular dish gloves, and I find them to be much, much better than regular latex gloves. It definitely will protect your hands. I actually had these gloves sitting, or not sitting, but I had them filled with naphtha and left it overnight just to see how well it would keep the chemicals from coming through, and they did great. Oh, pro tip, food saver bags are great for storing your brushes. I tried it to use it for food and it was terrible, but it worked perfectly for preserving brushes, so I can reuse it for another project instead of having to go out and get another brush. And of course, clamp this overnight. Those are quick clamps. You want to make sure you clamp it so it attaches to itself perfectly. And of course, I'm just leveling everything out, making sure it's nice and smooth, so I can put some of this packing tape on it to help reinforce that side to keep the foam from separating and blowing out on you. You want to use friction like that to help melt the glue and attach it to the foam, because you don't want it to delaminate. And that's it. That's the build. So stay tuned for the review. Hey Kinfolk, so we're all done with the rebuild. So the new blade is on. I put a little crossguard here so I can kind of get a little bit of a trigger grip and a handle, and it's nice and tight where my hand's not going to slide around at all. And if I happen to hit somebody with the Forte, or if somebody hits this Forte, it's not going to destroy their weapon, but it keeps my hand back and it maximizes my range, and it won't slip out of my hands because of that new would handle. So I'm going to talk about my general view of the black market sword. So as far as boffer weapons go, they are very good. They are definitely a B+. Why a B+? Well, a B+ because certain things could have been better. One thing is that the handle could have been a bit bigger, and I understand they have to build it to, you know, one size fits all. Generally, you know, some people would say, oh, the handle's too big, or what have you. And I think that just going a little bit bigger wouldn't hurt. And I also believe that balancing could be a bit better. We can put some counterweights in the pommel to bring the counterweight back to the handle. And I'm not a big fan of long handles either. That's one of my bigger pet peeves on weapons, because ultimately I almost always grab it here, and if somebody comes in close and I chop, they can get a handle right to the hand. And it's happened to me and it's happened to other people, which is why I don't particularly like long handles. But to each their own. Some people really like choking up on it, and you know, you kind of get a short sword and a long sword in one. I don't particularly believe that is as useful as people seem to think it does. And I have done it, and I don't particularly feel like there's any big difference. The cloth cover is great. This thing has gone through 2 years of abuse, and it's just really good. My only problem with the cloth cover is it's synthetic. And every time a synthetic fiber gets wet, it tends to stretch. And say you hit somebody on a shield, that excess fabric will whip around and hit the guy. He'll think he got hit. And that's kind of a big issue with synthetics. I've, you know, in my previous days of making cloth covers, I went back to cottons and things like that, like a broadcloth. And it ended up being a lot better because it didn't stretch when it got wet. It was a little bit heavier because it definitely sucked in the moisture, but it was almost a negligible amount of weight. So let me talk about the build of how I improved on it. Of course, let's start with the handle. So I just had some poplar dowels that or a big poplar dowel that I just shaved down, got an oval shape going. And that oval shape, obviously, for those who don't know, helps me know where the edge is. So it gives me a good edge alignment. So no matter what, that outside edge is going to tell me where that blade is. And I'm much less likely to hit them with the flat of the blade. Not only is it safer for them, but it's also better for me because my shots will actually count. And so moving on from there, I used this Crossguard, this 4-pound MC foam, and I just hot glued it in the middle and trimmed off any of the glue that was squeezed out and taped over it. And you can barely tell. It's just faster than using contact cement, and it's fewer chemicals in the air that I'm breathing in. And I Gorilla Glued both of these in place because ultimately I've used Gorilla Glue on both foam and wood, and it holds just fine, and it holds up perfectly. It's never given up on me. And the other thing is, when blades come down, I'm hoping that Crossguard will catch them like that, and I'll be able to repost a bit more. The other thing is, or the third thing, is that I'll give a nice trigger grip. I'll be able to get a bit more finesse and control over the blade, and it's less likely to come out of my hands with that grip. So one of the things that I find to be lacking in the Gorg sword here is that the tip could have been a little bit better. And again, it did last 2 years, but I think it could have lasted a bit longer if they did their thrusting tip. Now I went straight down to the core, and I found that the foam was shoved inside the fiberglass, the carbon fiber, and it was glued there. And that really doesn't stop the core from getting rounded over. It just retains its sharpness. It'll add a little bit of help, but ultimately adding a tiny little biscuit on top and torque wrapping it on there helps round off that edge. And I've built weapons for decades now, and that's the best method in my opinion. And that helps preserve a lot of that tip and keeps it from blowing out. It also adds just a bit more cushioning to that tip, so you're not skewering anybody. Alright, Kinfolk, so that's basically the sword rebuild in a nutshell. And it feels really good in the hands, and again, it's a really good weapon manufacturer. Gorg is a really solid brand. Gorg the foamsmith, or Gorg the blacksmith. I would definitely check them out. They have very reasonable prices for the quality that you're getting. It's a really solid blade. Like I said, it lasted 2 years, and that goes a long way with me. I've said it before, and I definitely am hard on things, and I was hard on this, and it lasted. It held up to the abuse for a good 2 years. And yeah, so yeah, you can check them out. They're down in the links down in the description, and there's going to be the URL right there, so you can check them out right there. And yeah, tell them the Bearded Axe sent you. And it helps me out when you do that to the channel. It helps just spread the word. So that, speaking of which, be sure to like, sub, and share all that stuff to help promote the channel and grow my viewership, and so I can get this channel really rolling and I can do some bigger and better stuff. And if what I've done is helpful or useful or just entertaining, then you guys owe me a coffee. Now go down in the description, check out my Ko-Fi, and you can just donate just $3, just a little bit, just to say, hey, I appreciate what you do. Here's a coffee on me. Now my Patreon, if you want to be more of a long-term supporter, then check out my Patreon. There's all sorts of benefits being a part of the Patreon team. So check that out. That's also in the description below. And of course, I have an Etsy shop, and you can go to my Etsy shop and purchase things there. And just one-time purchase, and everything that, any profits, any capital that I gain off of that, that goes directly back into the channel, buying microphones, better cameras, better editing, platforms and gear. Everything that you do definitely helps. And if you can't afford anything at this stage in American history, if you just can't afford it, then just a like, sub, and share. And making sure that you leave a comment and sending me some encouragement, and that doesn't really cost you anything. And I appreciate all that you guys do, and anything and everything that you guys do for me. And that's all I got for you today, nerds. I'm going to send you home with a be humble, be helpful, and be honorable. Thank you for watching.